Hello and welcome to The Other Marthas, the show where a drama student and a film graduate try to make sense of things we wish we were qualified in instead. A quick disclaimer before we get started, we don't claim to be experts in any of the fields we'll be discussing, so while everything we say will be based on individual research, it's just a bit of fun and we suggest that you take everything we say with a pinch of salt. Today we bring you part 2 of our Everest Blockbuster series, in which we move on from the 1996 catastrophe and start discussing one of Everest's deadliest seasons since 2006.
Shall I tell you my tale now?
I would love for you to tell me your tale.
Wonderful. So before I tell my tale, I want to tell you something dramatic that I did the other day. Last night, in fact. So, as we've touched on, I work in TV and film. Often we have night shoots in outdoors, quite cold locations. I was genuinely looking at Everest equipment to wear for cold outdoor night shoots. Because my thought is like, if you can climb Everest in it, you can definitely stand in a freezing cold field.
I mean, it's going to be like minus 25 as an average, I think, up in the death zone kind of area, which is just inconceivable.
Very cold. Here's the thing. I just thought if I was wearing 1,000-pound Everest climbing boots, I'd hope they'd be warm.
Oh, you would be sending those back with some strong words.
I think Millet was the company I was looking at.
Millet, lovely.
And I also I found myself on the most bizarre website you've ever seen. Right. I think it was called like Everest Supplies or something like that. I mean, last week I was on a very bizarre website as well. Check out last week's episode to find out which website I was on.
I was on
that one.
Yeah, it's a funny. You'll have to watch last week's episode.
So I went on this website and it was like, you get Millet Everest boots and you also get a down all-in-one suit. And I was thinking, watch me turn up on set for a night shoot in my Everest gear. Like, amazing. Hi, I'm never going to climb Everest, but I spent £2,000 on a suit and boots because I'm cold naturally.
I think, to be fair, if you had the money, that would be a very sensible thing. No, you don't. But it would be a very sensible thing to spend it on if you spend a lot of your time being cold.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. And like, I full on nearly caught frostbite on some of the shoots I've been on.
Oh God. Like
my toes were like blistering.
Oh.
And going white. Yeah.
Jesus.
Frostbite. That's frostbite, lads. So there's that. The second thing I want to say before I get into this is I watched a documentary. The story I'm telling, 2006, mostly focusing on the Mark Inglis expedition and David Sharp. I watched a documentary that I believe was made by, not really but by New Zealanders.
Yeah, I think New Zealand, I don't know if they have a very strong climbing team.
Oh,
or something, but they seem to be very prolific climbers.
I think they've got a lot of mountains.
That makes sense.
So there's quite a community of it. But yeah, because I watched this documentary that is narrated and also everyone in the interviews, other than one guy, were from New Zealand. If some of the more technical climbing terms or the names are pronounced with a slightly weird New Zealand accent, it's because they're the only people I've ever seen pronounce them.
Totally fair.
And I've only ever read them elsewise.
In your own voice, presumably.
Yes, in the book that I read. So
it'd be great if you'd just done it in an Irish accent. But I assume you don't.
I do sometimes read in accents. Because to practice the accent, when you're reading, you often come across words you don't think about. So
yeah, and you're like, how would one say that? Like this.
Anyway, so that is my snowsuit desire and my New Zealand disclaimer. Onto the tale. So, David Sharp, the Nick Keel book that I read mostly followed this situation. So most of my information is from that. And then I also watched a documentary. But David Sharp was a fan of Everest. He'd tried to climb it quite a few times. I think this one was his third attempt.
God.
And twice before, I think he had to turn back, which seems to happen often with climbers where they kind of put everything into their, like, whatever attempt they've decided is their last.
Yeah.
They put it all into that and often make mistakes.
Yeah, and you can see why though as well, because they've survived it however many times before, and they're like, this time I will just push to the top. It's not going to be that different. But
yes. So he was on, David Sharp was on a group expedition with a company called Asian Trekking.
Oh, yes.
One of those companies
companies.
I think they charge around $8,000.
Bearing in mind, how much does your average, like, actually equipping you for Everest thing cost? I'm not sure, but it's a lot.
The group that Mark Inglis was climbing with is called HimX, run by Russel Bryce. And I believe generally an expedition with them costs $40,000.
Right. So this is like less than a quarter of...
Yes. And again, it's one of those that gives you a spot at base camp and your permit to climb.
Wow.
And that's about it. Sometimes they also give you transport from, like, wherever you come in.
But either way, equipment-wise, you're completely on your own. Guide-wise, you're completely on your own.
Yes.
Wow.
So, but because he was, like, quite a prolific climber, I think he'd already climbed another 8,000 meter mountain. So it seems like quite experienced people that kind of have their own way of doing things, go for the cheaper option, which makes sense because if you know how to climb a mountain, then crack on most of the time. So it was a bunch of people, but they basically just had their tents in the same place. They weren't working together. And there are reports of him being, like, not like a loner, like he had friends that were also climbing at the same time. He wasn't climbing with them, but they were in the same season, so he'd be seen with them. I think there's a guy called McGuinness was his friend.
Okay.
And he also he always brought with him the complete works of Shakespeare and the Bible.
On his climbs?
On his climbs, yeah.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, is it David Sharpwood or McThingy?
David Sharp.
David Sharp. To be fair, like, at least if you're in a situation where you know you can't be saved, but you have your faculties about you now, then, like, reading the book of your faith or something would presumably be quite comforting.
Generally, I'll get onto it, but generally with the Summit, you don't take a lot.
No.
So, so that's a little bit about him, with his Bible. And he was kind of seen throughout the season, as in, I think it was around, it was the 13th of May was his summit attempt, but in the days leading up to that, because I think you spend about 2 months on Everest and about 10 days actually climbing. Yeah,
a lot of it is acclimatizing, isn't it?
Yeah. So in his time on the mountain at Advanced Base Camp, he was spending quite a lot of time, like, doing a little climb up, leaving supplies for himself, coming back down. Like, he was kind of making his own preparation.
Trail. That makes a lot of sense.
And he also climbed with no radio and no oxygen, because he was one of those who likes the challenge of being completely unsupported. Yeah. Which, I mean, I was going to say good for you, but I've got here it is written. He climbed the 6th highest mountain. I don't know what it's called, but he had.
Cool.
So in 2006, weather forecasts were good and encouraged more amateur climbers. So there were a lot of people on the mountain in 2006. This brings us to our main players of the drama that would unfold.
Ooh.
Mark Inglis, who I've mentioned before. So during this time, Russel Bryce, who runs HimX, was involved with a documentary crew from Tigris Productions in Bristol, and they were filming a documentary about climbing Everest.
Hmm.
One of the reasons why this group was really interesting for the documentary is that Mark Inglis was a double amputee just below his knee.
Okay.
And he had special legs that had crampons on them.
Wow.
So he could climb. And actually, one of the guys, I think he's called Mark Fetu or Wetu. I don't know, because again, they pronounced it one way and I don't know.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go with Fetu and hope. I believe it was actually Mark Fetu who made his legs. So that's fun.
Amazing.
There was also another guy climbing with them he was an American biker, and he had one of his legs completely pinned, so he couldn't bend his ankle.
Oh, that's got to be really hard when you're climbing.
Yes, and there was another guy who was older, and he had just had surgery. And the surgeon, I think he had cancer, and the surgeon had agreed to operate from the front rather than the back so that the guy could wear his pack on Everest.
Wow.
So this is a team of like survivors.
Climbers, yeah.
Compromised, but survivors. And I've like the book that I read said that Bryce does specialize. Like
cool.
If you are physically disabled, Bryce is the guy you want to go to, because he has accommodated for a lot of people to climb Everest.
Fantastic.
He has like a policy of keeping people cautious on the mountain, because he knows that they've spent all of this money to climb the mountain, but if they're like, I'm going to the summit, and he doesn't want it to happen, it won't happen. He often doesn't climb with his teams. He camps at Third or Col, which I think are the same thing, Third Camp or Col, to watch from below. And
okay, that makes sense.
Like he kind of runs everything from there, which, no offense to your guys, but I would say going up the mountain with your climbers when you run the expedition isn't necessarily the best move. Because if you get lost, there's no one running the whole operation.
Which was very real when both team leaders went AWOL.
They also have a guy called Dorje. It was his 6th attempt on the mountain. And my favourite person, Ferber. He's the strongest Sherpa guide on Everest.
Wow.
He is an absolute legend, and we will get into it.
Amazing, okay.
Also, there's a guy called Wayne Alexander, aka Cowboy. Mark Inglis is a double amputee from below the knee. He was a guide on Mount Cook in New Zealand, and he was stuck in an ice cave for 13 days because of a blizzard with his friend.
Oh my god.
And
was this pre-amputation or post?
Yes, so this is why his legs were amputated. He was in the ice cave for 13 days, and he wasn't able to be rescued for 13 days. They could get food to them, and he said in the documentary, like, I was happy to wait there for 13 days because I knew it wasn't safe for anyone else to come and get me. And after that, he lost both of his legs. Most experienced Everest climbers, like the ones who have climbed 8,000 meter mountains before, have experienced either the death of a companion or not nearly dying themselves, or both.
Probably both multiple times.
Yes. So the guy that's climbing with Inglis is Mark Fetu. He went for the summit late with his friend Mike Reinberg, and he had to leave Reinberg because he went blind from a cerebral edema on the mountain, and Fetu lost all of his toes on that event.
Wow.
So that is context for the 13th of May, when Mark Inglis takes a photo of the summit and they see Sharp alone trying to summit Everest late in the day. Because Mark knows that's not what we do. But there's nothing they can do for him because up he goes.
He's a dot in the sky.
Exactly. The weird thing about this is, in the book I read, they passed... in the book I read, Nick claims that this team passed David a few times going up the mountain, and they encountered him a few times. He was very, very slow and just kept trucking along, pausing, kept going, and he carried on when obviously they'd decided to stop.
That does kind of change things in terms of not culpability, but just...
Oh, well, no, because the thing is when you're climbing Everest, you actually climb so slowly.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
People see it as like, oh, I'm so strong, like climbing Everest. Actually, you're shuffling along. You can barely breathe. Like, there's 5 steps and then you stop. Like,
I was going to say, like,
it isn't like, oh, he's not climbing very strong. No one's climbing strong.
No,
everyone
that's
is
true.
Climbing like they've never climbed a mountain before.
That's true. Like, I've climbed at nowhere near that altitude, obviously, but I think around 15,000 feet, so about half the height of the summit. And it is like altitude. It doesn't get to the Everest extent until you're at like 25,000 feet, but it does just change thing, and you'll look and go, oh, that's easy, I'll get there in half an hour, but you just are moving more slowly. It's weird.
I don't think you can say that there's culpability because he's climbing slowly, because, and I'm not saying you are, but like, everyone climbs slowly.
Yeah. My point wasn't about him climbing slowly. It was the fact that they kept passing him if they did.
No, it was sort of that they kept encountering him. But when you're like, the thing with Everest, a lot of it's like one at a time stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like, you do keep encountering people because...
Yeah, that's true.
You might stop at the side for a bit, they'll trudge past you, then they stop and you trudge, like, it's sort of...
And I guess then if he's way ahead of you by the time you've decided to turn round, and you're like, is that the guy we saw without oxygen earlier? Not a lot you can do at that point.
So, they calculated that he would have had to have spent 12 hours in the death zone to reach the summit from Camp 4 at the speed that he was going.
Blimey.
Which I think is normally about 8 hours. So it's not massively over, but it's
just gonna
3 hours longer than you want.
Well, 4 hours.
It's actually 12 hours longer than you want in a place called the Death Zone, but okay.
Apparently there's some lovely vistas.
Yeah, I suppose you do. So on the 14th of May, they wake up at 11 a.m. to begin their bid for the summit, and they note that it's a really cold morning, which, like, probably every morning's cold on Everest, but it's especially cold. And one guy even said he had to put on his electric boot heaters. Again, I want them.
So cool.
So they said they left early so that they could get ahead of the pack, because they looked down the mountain and all they could see were head torches just coming up. Because so another thing about Bryce and his Himex expeditions is most expeditions have 3 camps up Everest. So they're sort of like at slightly different points, and from Camp 3 is lower than Bryce's Camp 4. And then, so you have a longer walk up to the summit, whereas Bryce's Camp 4 is sort of less time to the summit, but a harder camp to be at.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas I think on the south side, they just naturally have 4, but on the north, Bryce has another one. And so they see this pack of head torches coming, and they're like, we need to go. Yeah. Because these guys are fairly experienced climbers, and if you get stuck behind more amateurish climbers on Everest, it's really frustrating. I know I would be full of rage if I was like, I'm running out of oxygen, I'm freezing cold, and you are being so slow.
Again, it's like, there's frustrating, and then there's, I've brought 8 hours worth of oxygen and you're using up an hour. Oh my God.
Well, apparently they did encounter quite a few people that just wouldn't move out of their way, and that were going really slowly, and they were saying, let us pass. And they wouldn't let them pass.
God.
So, here we are. Russel Bryce was at Camp 2, 1,000 meters below.
Wow, Camp 2, amazing.
He monitors the...
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I forgot he wasn't climbing with them.
No, he doesn't. He just watches, because he's got a good view up the mountain from there.
And then he can radio them and be like, there's a cloud coming up.
Yes, and also Bryce apparently has some of the best weather forecasting technology there is on Everest.
Wow.
He pays a lot to companies to use it, and so he gets quite salty. Often, if people see Bryce's lot heading up, they also head up.
Oh no, so they're getting kind of free tip.
Because they know if he's sending people up, it's going to be good.
Mm.
Which is like, I think they call him the big boss as well.
That's cool.
Yeah. The book I read is very favourable towards Bryce. So, there are things that maybe we'll get into. There's a rush not to get caught in traffic jams because you don't want to get caught in traffic jams, because traffic jams are annoying when you're in a lovely warm car. They're even more annoying when you're freezing to death.
With limited oxygen.
Yes. Throughout the climb, all of the group are being encouraged by the Sherpas that are with them to keep moving to prevent frostbite.
Right.
Because, again, we spoke about it in your part, but if you keep moving, the planet, like, the hope is that you don't get frostbite.
Well, I mean, it's like pretty much basic as it's easier for you to literally freeze if you're still, obviously, so don't do that. If possible. Not like blaming anyone for being still on Everest. I'm sure it's very difficult to keep moving on Everest.
Slow pokes.
Idiots. Yeah, no.
The other thing is that because they set off at 11 p.m, you're climbing in the dark.
Yes.
8,500 meters up.
Yeah.
Which is so bizarre to me and terrifying. One of the guys in the documentary, to be honest, I didn't know who was who, because like they put their names at once and I can't memorize 4 men's faces. I had that issue
as well.
Full stop, I can't do it. I only know 4 men. But one of them said, you get a sense of evil. Another guy said, you could never carry someone down here. And Fetu said, there are a lot of bodies you have to climb over.
Yeah.
So that was their review. At 1 a.m, they get to Green Boots Cave.
Aha.
So Green Boots, for the uninitiated, was an Indian climber who died in a cave, and his body's still there, and they call him Green Boots because he's got green boots.
And he's a popular resting point, isn't he, for climbers on the north side?
The weird thing is no one said that in any of the things.
Oh,
like, no one said, oh, we rest here. People sort of say, like, we move on by, like, we say hi to him,
we went, we're at Green Boots now, we're close.
Yeah. Rather than rest. But
maybe my source was making it up. I don't know.
It's more of like a landmark, I suppose. Green Boots also, I had seen pictures of Green Boots before this. I'd then forgotten and went back to my initial assumption that Green Boots was like a climber from the 40s.
Right.
So I assumed they were kind of like green, like dark green leathery boots just poking out of snow.
Yeah, no, they're lurid, aren't they?
It's like bright green, and he's like lying sort of in the recovery position.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is quite a odd thing to see.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is because the piece I watched that featured the Green Boots Cave, which was a while ago, this was before researching for this, the lady talking was saying, it's common to have a sit and sort of get your breath back before that last bit, so you just sit next to Green Boots, which must be really bizarre. But regardless of whether or not that's true, just the fact that at any point you're very likely sitting next to someone who also looks like they're just chilling.
I think that's the thing. I think what strikes me about Green Boots is that it looks like he's sleeping.
Yeah.
And he's just...
Yeah, none of the bodies up there are ever gonna age, really, are they?
Yeah, but I think it's the way he's lying is such like a vulnerable...
Yeah. Well, presumably the guy died while having a rest.
Yeah, probably. I think not a lot's known.
No.
I think they're not even certain who he is. There's a guy that they're pretty sure it's him.
Right.
But it's not confirmed. It's just like he was climbing Everest and he's not come back. So
right, and he maybe had green boots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the guys said about Green Boots, when you die, you stop being flesh and blood and you become part of the mountain.
Wow. Really interesting way of thinking.
Yeah. Which I think if you are someone who loves mountain climbing and like Everest is the pinnacle, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Like, obviously it's a bad thing to be dead, but if you die climbing the highest,
doing the thing you love,
like, obviously it's no fun to freeze to death on a mountain,
but yeah, that's what they did with Rob Hall's body as well. They because they could get to it, and they retrieved his wedding band for his wife, but his wife said leave him there, I think he would like to be there.
Yeah, I think there are definitely people, and I think if I was someone who wanted to climb Everest, I think I would probably be one of the people that said, if I die, leave my body there, because it's not in anyone's way.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'd be the same.
I think I would want to be, rather than like thrown down the side, which some people do want for privacy.
Yeah.
I think I would quite enjoy being a landmark.
Yeah.
And I'd probably haunt it too.
Yeah, you'd be the poltergeist, and you could just make sure you wear something really distinctive so that if you do die, you will be a landmark.
Oh, yeah. I'd be like, oh, and that's Martha. She climbed Everest in a chicken suit because she wants to be a landmark.
I love that. And you're not chicken suit. That's Martha. She climbed. We want to emphasize this was a person who is this stupid.
I'd have a sign.
I'm Martha. I climbed Everest in this chicken suit. I climbed Everest and all I got was this lousy chicken suit.
I want to be a landmark.
Sorry for laughing. Obviously, it's horrifying.
I mean, yes, but we're already talking about it.
Yeah, true.
We're already talking about it. Let's mock it. So they are climbing past Green Boots, and one of the men turns to the other to say, "Here's Green Boots," and there's someone else in the cave.
Yes. Oh God.
Our friend Mark, whatever your name is, Wetu Fetu. I don't know what it is. I genuinely don't. Shall I look it up?
Just go with Fetu. You've been going with Fetu.
Oh God, if I look it up and it's Wetu now, I'm gonna lose my mind.
We're not going back. Just go with Fetu.
Mark Fetu. Mark Fetu realizes that this is the guy they saw the previous evening climbing alone. Their assumption is that he summited the night before and ascended in the dark, stopped up for the night, but because the night was so cold, the coldest of the season, it did not go well for him.
God. Bear in mind also at this point, no one had survived a night that high on Everest, because I think the first person to survive a night actually in the death zone was Lincoln Hall, wasn't it?
We'll get on to him.
Okay.
So, do you know what? From now on, I'm just going to call Fetu Mark, because I'm not confident in it.
Great.
So Mark...
Wait, what was the other guy's name? Engels. Is he also called Mark?
He is also called Mark, but Mark Engels will be Engels. Mark Wetu Fetu will be Mark.
Fabulous.
Just like we're both called Martha, and there's no confusion there.
No, because we're the only ones listening. Let's drink to that. So
Mark encourages Sharp to get moving. They kind of shout at him, "Come on, we need to get going. Get yourself down the mountain." They sort of also presumed that Sharp's head torch broke, and so he decided, instead of stumbling down in the actual dark, he would stop at Green Boots.
Yeah.
But they tell him that because there are so many people climbing this morning, he could follow the line of torches.
Yeah.
To get down.
So he is Sharp at this point, kind of responsive?
No. He is sat kind of hunched over with his hands around his knees and his head down.
Oof.
He's shivering and breathing.
Okay.
But that's about it. I think he also looks at one of the men, but he doesn't stand or move. So they encouraged Sharp to get moving, and then they moved on because the guides had a duty to their clients and their climbers. Cowboy.
Sorry, and this is, they know that he spent the night.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they know he spent the night. And so one of the guys described him as, this is one of the guys who's like climbed Everest loads, described him as more dead than alive.
Yeah. It just seems weird that if you've climbed Everest that many times, you'd be like, I know that he spent the night here. No one has ever survived spending a night up this high. Get moving! Good boy, David, up we go.
I think, well, no, they weren't trying to get him up, they're trying to get him down.
No, I know, but they just wanted to go
I
up.
think the thing is that what I've heard and seen and read a lot of is if they know he spent the night and they know no one's ever spent the night, they know he's basically dead. They don't even know at this point how much he can comprehend because he isn't responding to them in any way. So
and I guess they feel the most helpful thing is to encourage him as though they think he's going to live rather than saying, do you have any last rites? I think
at this point, they made the decision to encourage him to move. And when he didn't, they then kind of made the assessment of,
that kind of makes sense.
Dying.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
But Cowboy, which is so weird calling this man Cowboy, what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Because it makes him sound very like cavalier.
Yeah.
But he was actually massively emotionally affected by this.
God.
He said it was the worst thing he'd seen in his life.
God.
He said, God bless you, rest in peace. Which, like, I'm sure you're trying to be nice, Cowboy, but the man's might still know what you're saying to him.
Yeah, he maybe doesn't need to hear that.
No, he doesn't need to hear that, but, you know, I mean, he seems like he was a religious man, so maybe he did.
Yeah, maybe he appreciated it, yeah.
We don't know. And he said in the documentary that he wanted to touch him and that his biggest regret was that he didn't make contact with Sharp when he saw him.
It's an interesting biggest regret.
Well, I think as I get more into it, like, I am on the side of the team and their decision to leave him. And I'll talk about that when I share more of the story. But he's just, you know, as a preliminary point, he's so high up, there's so much technical climbing.
There's very little chance they could actually help him.
I just think, and he spent the night there, the coldest night of the season, so it's kind of like, obviously it's not ideal to leave someone to die.
No,
but I don't feel like I can judge these people, because it's not like they were evil in their decision. They probably were trying to, you know, I
mean, as far as they were concerned, they were basically leaving someone dead as opposed to dying, I suppose, which is a very different thing.
I think the phrase "more dead than alive" sums up how they felt about Sharp. Is that, like, and I've seen a lot in what I've read that basically if you can't walk off of Everest past a certain point, you don't come off Everest.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
it's
you have to walk.
Yeah, and I don't know about the North Face, but again, the South Face has places where you literally need to be able to support your weight on a rope. And if you can't do that, you can't get down. And no one can support someone else's weight and their weight on a rope.
No. So there are, like, you know, there are points where it just isn't possible. Yeah. And so I don't feel like I can judge these.
No, my concern is more, and I'm aware that I have not by any means heard the whole story yet, but just the fact that they then continued trying to summit rather than maybe staying with him and radioing down.
Well, one of the guides claimed that he did radio down to Bryce, who was at his base. Bryce claims he didn't receive a radio call. So this is where people start wondering, like, is Bryce an evil genius? I don't think he's an evil genius. Maybe he didn't get a radio call. The guys that say, the guide that says that he radioed says he was at altitude. Maybe he didn't press a button. Maybe the radio didn't work and he didn't realize, because he's seen a dying man, he's at altitude, he's worried about his climbers. There's a lot going on. So
absolutely.
And Bryce writes a log of all of the communication that he receives with timestamps. So it would be weird that he wouldn't put this down, especially because of what happens later.
A lot of room for error. There isn't anyone being evil.
No, it's just people in very extreme circumstances making decisions that the majority of us will never have to make.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Bryce is adamant that he did not receive a radio call. So he also comes across in the documentary I watched as quite defensive, but once I get into the stuff that happened after, it's understandable.
I see.
I would also be defensive.
Yeah.
30 to 40 people also passed David Sharp in the cave, and there are no other radio calls in, no other reports that anyone stopped for him.
Can't believe that.
Some people may have thought he was Green Boots.
Maybe.
He was kind of tucked into the back of the cave. Green Boots is kind of along the side and his shoes stick out, and David was in the back. So if they saw him at all, they might have been like, oh,
same guy.
I don't really know how they would think that, but some people might have thought he was dead already, because he, like, even the earlier guys assumed he was dead to start with. And it was only when they looked at him for a while they saw that he was shivering.
I feel like I've heard that I think it was a group of Chinese climbers might have stopped and given him water.
Okay, well, there were a lot of Chinese climbers on Everest that day. So
I could be making that up, but I think that's the thing, but not massively helpful.
Well, you know,
you do what you can. It's a nice gesture.
So at this point, Engels' oxygen mask valve breaks.
Aye.
So he basically, like, over half of the oxygen that he's meant to be getting from his tank is now leaking out, which means he has to either turn up the tank less time with the oxygen, but more initially, or run on less. So because Ingles had even more of a lack of oxygen than everyone else, and he also had extreme pain in his legs, like in his stumps, he was really struggling. And also, a fun fact about May 14th, 2006, was Everest was actually sticking out of the atmosphere that day.
What?
Yes, a quote from the guide: "Space had come down to meet us."
How does that happen?
Well, because, like, you know, there's the atmosphere sphere around Earth, and Mount Everest is so tall that sometimes the summit just pokes its way out.
So I genuinely wasn't aware. So does the atmosphere just kind of like bob a little bit?
I assume so. I mean, I'm not.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, it's not. It's like gaseous, but wouldn't that mean that at the very summit, you can't breathe because there's no atmosphere?
No, because there are layers, aren't there, of the atmosphere.
Right. So it's like, oh, getting a bit ozony up here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because they actually, they like have pressure gauges and things like that. And the guy looked at his pressure gauge and was like, oh, we're in space.
That's mad.
Yeah, and then they were describing climbing to the summit as you take 5 steps and a rest, but it's even slower than that. You don't have this revelation of the summit. There's just nothing in front of you anymore.
Wow.
I assume, like, the way that I've walked up in comparison to Everest, very small hills, is I ragefully stare at my own feet until I've reached the top.
So then it's like, yes. What is revealed.
And so I assume it must be similar to that, because you're looking at the rope and moving yourself along with the safety ropes. You're making sure you're stepping where you should be. And so eventually you're just like, there's no more mountain to climb up.
Yeah. And also, to be fair, there are, you know, that there's a lot of video taken, obviously, from the Summit of Everest. And it does look amazing.
The weird thing is that the pictures that this team took, they're like, oh, we took our Everest pictures, and it like put the Everest pictures on screen, and it was like him against like a white wall, which I assume is like ice or snow. And I was like, yeah,
you could be anywhere, mate.
Can you like turn the other way, because I could take a picture in front of a white wall right now.
Dear. Yeah, there are a lot of those actually, like where it's just snow in the background. It's like, that's great, but you could be at Snowdome. If you just turn a little that way, we can see the millions of flags and the view from 8,000 meters up.
Yeah,
but I mean, I guess it's that's all kind of old to them at this point.
Cowboy, our friend Cowboy, described it as a very sober happy.
Oh.
And Ingles, who is a big fan of Sir Edmund Hillary, he said, I've shared a footstep with Sir Ed.
Oh.
Only one, because Ed climbed the south and Ingles climbed the north, but he said, but it's the one that counts, which I appreciate.
That's really sweet.
So at this point, Ingles' oxygen is mostly depleted. He's got frostbitten fingers and painful stumps.
Get down.
And he doesn't want to fall out of his legs.
Yeah.
So they spend about 20 minutes on the summit. They've radioed in to let Bryce know. At 11 a.m, we're at Green Boots Cave again with the B team of the HIMEX 2006, 14th of May.
Is this still their ascending now?
So Max Shire, who I believe was one of the guides, I keep wanting to call them guards, radioed for Bryce to tell him about David Sharp. And Bryce listened for 20 minutes and then advised them to move on. So again, with this team, they were trying to help him, trying to get him up, trying to move him. And Bryce said, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think it really depends on what you've done, because like, if you've really tried to pummel him awake and drag him a bit and nothing's happened, then at that point it's like, well, we've done literally everything that's within our physical capabilities that might help him.
So then the A team is coming back down the mountain now, and Sharp hasn't moved, and Cowboy described it as excruciating to watch.
He's still alive.
Yes. And he, like, in the documentary, Cowboy is like, he looks so sad about it, which I don't think Cowboy was as experienced as the others. I'm not certain, but just the reaction that he had to seeing, like, everyone else was not like, didn't care, but they've seen their friends die.
It's very tragic collateral that happens.
Yes, whereas Cowboy seems like very emotional about it.
Like, I guess if you were new to the police force and you see your first homicide and you're like, oh, okay.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's just not something people encounter in their normal life.
Yeah.
Here we get to Phurba Tashi, my favourite guy. Ferber spent 25 minutes with David, and I believe Ferber was with the A team. Yes, he was. And he gave him some of his oxygen. He moved him out into the sun, got David onto his feet, but he was frozen in, like, his limbs were frozen bent.
Oh no.
Because he'd been sat there for, I don't know how many hours at this point, all night and until like around midday the next day. So Ferber actually picked him up and had him on his back. And he managed to move, and this was Ferber and another Sherpa guy attempted to pick him up, and he got about 4 steps and had to put him down and returned him to the cave, and he couldn't bring him down. Yeah. But David did recover enough from the oxygen and the sun to tell them his name and the team that he was with. This is why I like Ferber. It seems like he's done the most.
Yeah. Like he's actually gone, I intend to bring him down, and then gone, oh, I can't.
Yes. And I think he would have, like, Ferber's climbed the mountain so many times. I think he's summited 30, like 8,000 meter mountains. So he's like experienced. And so I think probably part of him would have known he wouldn't be able to come down with him, but he
tries all the same.
Gotta try.
Yeah.
Well, he tried. So they leave him again. Inglis' descent was increasingly painful, and they managed to, so he's already done the stairs. They're like fairly far down now. And so they managed to make a toboggan for him.
That's amazing. They
dragged him down some of the way.
Wow.
Because at this point, and this is, I mean, I know we're talking about graphic things, but I have quite a strong stomach, and even this was like a bit much for me. His bones had actually pierced the skin at the ends of his legs, like his stumps.
Oh God, just from like the impact.
From walking up the mountain for so long. Yeah. So like this guy's climbing on his own bones at this point, like toboggan him. Which they did. And in the end, Ferber put him on his back and carried him down. And the footage is amazing. Not the way I would choose to carry a human, but you know, you've done it more than me. He's like, Mark's kind of got his bum on Ferber's shoulders. And so he's kind of like way up here.
I see.
Sort of like, he's kind of like sitting on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Which is weird to me because that's such a high point of
Yeah.
gravity. Like, why wouldn't you
I was
pull
going to
that
say,
thing?
like, Ferber's a lot more likely to just topple.
Yes,
that,
but that's what he chose.
Maybe it was the only way. I was going to say, because like a piggyback would be more logical, but maybe...
No, but tie him on.
Yeah, but maybe his legs... I'm thinking, because you have to sort of brace your own legs for the piggyback, and if his legs were the problem, then maybe
true.
just
hanging
hanging
because
them
you
down.
couldn't hold on to his legs because his legs might fall off.
There we are.
Good thought. Yeah, it's just like, it's amazing footage, but initially I was like,
why is he
so
on his
high
shoulders? Yeah.
Wow. And Inglis said, that's why you don't climb alone, so that those around you can address issues before it's too late. Because again, the general rule is if you don't walk off of Everest, you don't get down. And although Inglis had said before that if he had to, he'd climb on his knees.
Yeah.
So he's like,
well, you would.
He's a tough guy.
Yeah, cool guy.
So back to David. Once they had found out his name, Russel Bryce went to find the camp. Well, I think they found out his name. Well, again, stories differ. So in one version, they found out his name and Bryce went to the camp. And another one, when it was radioed to him that they had found this man, Bryce went to find out who he was and who was unaccounted for.
Right, okay, yeah.
So Bryce went straight to Asian trekking, which some people have said, oh, how did you know it was Asian trekking? Like, oh, did you know more than you should have? Which the defense for that is Asian trekking is notoriously the least organized company on Everest.
Yeah.
And so he knew to go to them because he knew they wouldn't know if they were missing anyone.
God.
And he went into their camp.
I can't believe they're licensed.
Yes, he went into their camp and he said, are you missing someone? And it took McGuinness to his friend to say, David isn't here. This is a quote from Bryce. No one from David's own camp knew he was missing until he was dead.
Oh no.
Like, and I think that's the difference between the tours, is like, it's just complete polar opposites.
Yeah, that's the thing, like, it's basic. Just if you're going into that kind of perilous situation, you should only be allowed to go with a group of people who will keep tabs of you at all times, and you have a radio so you can say if you need help.
Yeah, I think from Bryce here again, this isn't a direct quote, it's just the gist of what he said. Asian trekking have the majority of fatalities and rescues needed. So, and a lot of the rescues are coordinated by HIMEX. The Inglis team managed to survive one of the most deadly periods on Everest. When Inglis returned home, because he had quite a public profile for being a double amputee climber, and he had an interview where he spoke about David Sharp, he sort of got slated by the press because of his, it wasn't really his decision to leave him, but because the decision to leave him.
Yeah.
Including by Sir Edmund Hillary, his hero.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, I heard about this.
So he said he didn't approve of their decision to leave David Sharp. It was a pathetic attitude and it was their duty to get him back to safety. Which, like, you weren't there, Edmund.
Yeah, I feel like that's strong. I get that he's been there before, but also there was no one else on the mountain at the time, was there?
I think also the thing is like, sure, you've climbed Everest, good for you, but also maybe have some compassion.
Yeah.
Because,
and also he's climbed Everest and that's clearly amazing, but he's not carried an inert body down Everest.
Exactly. Like, once you've done that, Edmund Hillary, go off. But until you've carried a person who's basically a dead weight from almost the summit of Everest, maybe keep your opinions to yourself. Yeah. I'm just like,
no, well, it's fair. It would. I just imagine. There's nothing they can do about it now. Just imagine the guilt. It would be horrific.
Well, exactly. And like, he could have said it in another way, like, oh, maybe in the future we could do it this way. But like, so Inglis had frostbite on his fingers and lost the tips, And he also had frostbite on his stumps as well as the bone piercing.
Did he have
and
to get
had
them
to have
amputated?
more taken off.
Wow.
And I think it was like right below the knee at that point, so he was concerned about how he would be able to continue climbing, because it's like if you've got a bit of anchorage below the knee, you can be quite secure in the limbs. But surely the higher up you go, the more difficult it is to...
Yeah. Was it so he was amputated slightly below the knee, and then he had to go to like right below the knee?
Yes, I believe that was... So I didn't write down numbers. He did say numbers and measurements, but
right.
I sort of thought I don't need to know the exact centimeterage.
But yeah, I mean, I guess if he's used to still having some leg beyond the bending point that you can anchor, whereas it's pretty much just on the joint now, I guess.
Because Hillary said this, and the way that he worded it kind of implicated Inglis, because he was the most public figure of the trip, because he was, you know, doing this amazing feat of climbing Everest, prosthetic legs. Everyone started blaming Inglis for Sharp's death and for not carrying him down. Here's my opinion. 2 strong, experienced Sherpa guides could not carry him down, and yet they expect a man who has like both of his legs amputated and has less oxygen than everyone else because it's broken, to be able to carry him down.
That is like ridiculous.
It's just like, I get it because he was the most public person, but this is a physically disabled man in one of the most, if not the most extreme environments on our planet, other than I guess the deep ocean, but then you're definitely dead. Like,
and he's one of about 40 people who could have and may have tried to help.
I don't know how that was who they chose to criticise, when it seems like there was no criticism of Asian trekking that allowed Sharp to climb the mountain.
Exactly, that's the thing. Like,
no contact with him.
Right. That because it's like I think a lot of the time, sort of heroic or good acts are seen as expected, and therefore if people don't rise to that, then it's like they failed. Whereas in fact it's amazing if someone can, for example, risk themselves to save another life, but it shouldn't be expected. They clearly couldn't have saved him.
No.
I personally think I would have then found it very difficult to go on to the summit.
Yes. But if you're that close to the summit, and you have no way of saving this man, what... Like,
there's nothing actually reprehensible about you going to the summit.
I think that's the thing, is that a lot of people said, well, you guys went to the summit afterwards. What would them not summiting achieve?
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing. The press and the public are blaming the people that did the most for him.
Yeah.
About the topic of blame, McGuinness, Sharp's friend, this is a quote from him. "Do I blame the people who walked past him? No. Did David expect to be rescued? Absolutely not. He was clear to me that he understood the risks. He did not want to endanger anyone else." So I think, like, if that's true, which I don't know why McGuinness would lie, I suppose to make people feel better, but like, if that's the case, then we can't be blaming anyone other than David Sharp, because he made his decision.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Other Marthas, the show where a drama student and a film graduate talk about things we have no business talking about. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe to our channel for more.